So
right.
basically, we've broken loads of myths today. Do different bounces and grinds actually affect your wedge play? Today we're meeting up with TaylorMade to check out all 7 options in their mill grind 4 offering and see if it can improve my short game.
Okay, so run me through the wedges that you currently carry now. So we've got a 46, 52, 58.
Yeah, the 46 and 52 have like higher bounce and pretty full soles because I basically use them for like pitching.
Okay,
Or
full
just-
shots?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full shots, 3/4 shots, and then I basically use my 58 for everything else.
Okay, do
So
you
I
use the
did
58 for full shots or not?
I try to hit it more up to like 3/4,
Okay.
up to like 65, 70. So I used to have a more like standard grind in this, but I play a lot of links golf because I still try to play like Scottish arm, Welsh arm, like English arm stuff, and like the ground gets so firm, so I'd get into scenarios where I'd have to like chip it over a bunker or flop it over a bunker or something. I just couldn't do it, like the sole was too bouncy.
Yeah.
So that's why I moved into this, but it obviously is 4 degrees back.
Very, very low, yeah.
So it is very low,
Yeah.
but it was kind of a choice between 4 or 8, and
Okay.
like the 8 just felt too much.
If you want to focus on having a set of wedges that can almost do everything for you, you've got 2 quite high bounce wedges in lower loft,
Yeah.
and then a very low bounce wedge in higher loft.
Yeah,
You haven't really
so-
got anything in between that's maybe just like a kind of
Yeah, definitely.
middle ground for you in a little bit more loft that you can start to utilize as well. What would you say is a bad wedge shot?
Say at the moment, if it's bad, I'm catching it like a bit thin. I did call the thin at least. Stop it.
Is that a shot that you hit often or not?
Not that often, but yes, sometimes, but not like every other shot often.
Yeah. So something that I noticed there is that even with a 58, you're still, I mean, the launch there is still very low
Yeah.
for a 58. You know, if you're delivering more loft there, obviously a 58 should be up here, you know, really, really high in terms of the flight. So if we've been really picky, out of those last half a dozen shots that you've hit, 5 of them were low on the face. What I'd like you to do here is just open up that face a little bit, okay? Add a little bit more bounce and play a couple of shots that have that face a little bit more open with a little bit more bounce. Just want to see how what that starts to do to strike location. Much better. And strike that. Interesting there to see that thinner strike. Now what I'm going to get you to do is I'm actually going to try and, I want to see you play this shot with a 52 degree wedge, with your 52 degree wedge, and just see if this changes. You know, all of a sudden we might find here that this is actually probably a better club from this kind of area. And then from here, you know, if we find that 52 maybe isn't quite enough loft, then we'll go into a club with slightly more. Go in. Right, I'm going to get you to play a couple of shots here with a little bit more loft.
Okay.
So I actually quite liked the shot that you were playing there with the 52, however it was coming out a little bit low.
Yeah.
I think just to see that flight a little bit higher, but in that same kind of shot, much better in terms of strike. I mean, we can still improve on that going forwards, but we're not seeing that thin strike from the higher lofted wedge.
I've just been using not enough bounce, haven't I?
When you go into low bounce, especially when you're steep, all that club's going to do is just come down and stop, okay? When you have a little bit more bounce, all of a sudden what that club's doing is it's going to then start to actually release, using the bounce as opposed to using the leading edge, okay? If you're using the leading edge to chip, you're always going to hit thin, okay? Whereas there, actually starting to use the bounce and release, you actually deliver the loft of the golf club.
Yeah.
So there, on that kind of shot, you can see like a 54 degree wedge or something around that area is much, much better, much more consistent in strike, and your proximity to the hole is a lot better as well, okay?
Basically, I've been causing all my own problems. At least I can say it was the club now, not me.
So now do you start to see the difference in terms of the actual loft there?
Yeah.
So you've got a 54 degree wedge in your hand with a little bit more bounce, and that's flying higher than a 58, right? Even when you tried to open the 58, because you were catching it so low in the face, very close to that leading edge, you're gonna get with a lower launch, you're going to get more ball speed. It's going to come out hotter, thinner, have less control. All of a sudden there, you release it nicely, that ball pops up and you've still got control. Now what'd be interesting here is that if I give you a 58 with more bounce, how do we see that start to work now? Any good? Mm-hmm. Yeah, much better, yeah? So straight away, the strike there with a little bit more bounce is much more consistent. There we go, that'll stop dead as well. Look. So there, all of a sudden, you can see the difference between, you know, there, how much higher that is in terms of the ball flight as well. All of a sudden, you can stop that. Strike's starting to move up the face as well, which is good. Now we've got a little shot here, which is a little bit more interesting than that last one, where, you know, not the best lie, very much short-sided. You know, this is where the ball's going to have to be spending a little bit more time in the air. Like we've seen with a bit more bounce, we have seen a little bit more of a pop up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to look through those different wedges in those higher bounce options and just see what works nicely here.
I didn't think I could leave that short, to be honest.
So the one thing as well is that when you go into like a low bounce wedge, especially in grass like this, it's not going to offer you that extra little bit that you need to get through the, you know, this horrible wet sticky stuff. You know, it's not nice, especially when we get into the bunker and we see the sand in there on a day like today where it's going to be wet and sticky. That low bounce is going to be very hard to get through. Okay, how does it feel in terms of release?
Good, yeah.
Yeah, feel okay? So I'm going to give you a low bounce just to see the difference now. Okay, so from this kind of TW grind into a lower bounce wedge, and then we'll also try a higher bounce wedge from here and just see what feels more like it, you know, really kind of helps you through the turf there. Let's try this one here. So this is a lot of bounce, the highest bounce and the widest sole that we have in a wedge. That certainly popped up, didn't it? Very good. Okay, so what we see from this shot is, you know, you've got confidence playing this shot, okay? So in terms of where we can start to narrow down the grinds, from here it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So we start to find areas where it will make a difference, okay? So we're gonna go over to the bunker, we're gonna play some shots on some tighter lie on the other side of the bunker, like really kind of burnt out ground that's, in there, and then get into the bunker and see how your bunker play is and see where we start to maybe find something a little bit easier. So here's the test. You know, this is going to be a lie that you tend to see on those linksy courses, that kind of dry, dead, not much ground to work with. You know, this will be a really interesting one to see where this bounce may come into its own a little bit more as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with the higher bounce wedge. How would you try and play this shot? Just run us through a little kind of what you're thinking here.
I'm just trying to nip it without hitting it with the front bounce of the club.
Okay. Almost too good in strike, wasn't it?
It was too good.
Yeah.
I kind of had more green to work with than I thought there. It's definitely a little bit low, but I got away with it.
Yeah. Very good. The one thing that now, where you've got a little bit more bounce, especially on a lie like this, you know, where it is tight, is you can be more aggressive with this. You know, you can start to throw that club into the ground because it's not going to stick, because that bounce is going to actually help the club to release a little bit. And there, what's really nice is you're starting to see that high loft that you want to see from a 60-degree wedge as well.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a low bounce wedge. So now we'll just start to see the kind of launch and flight and maybe where the connection is here in terms of, like, do we start to get a little bit bottom groovy again? Okay.
It's quite a bit heavy.
Lovely bit of stopping power. But again, that heavy strike. So straight away, what that bounce is doing is it's just causing it to dig a little bit, to de-accelerate. And the last thing you want to be doing from here is ending up in there. Yeah?
Yeah, I've been trying not to think about that. Oh.
So you can hear it in the sound as well, in the strike, can't you? That it's a little bit more dead. It's starting to take a little bit more turf as well. That nippy strike from having a little bit more bounce there is actually really nice, okay? So this is kind of sits right in between the two. This is going back into that standard bounce C grind where we've got a little bit more versatility in this sole. Now what I want you to do here is really start to open that face up a little bit. Again, what we can do now is by adding a little bit more loft, we're going to add a little bit more bounce. It's really interesting, isn't it, that, you know, straight away, just as soon as we start to take bounce off, we're not getting that crisp strike. We're not seeing that higher elevation that we'd expect from a more lofted wedge. And again, you can hear that in the strike there, a little bit more turf being taken again, yeah? Guess what?
So I'm a high bounce by any chance?
So that's just the high bounce, the standard sole, as opposed to the wide sole. Really nice. Very good. Right, let's jump in the sand now. Just feel how easy that is for the club to actually get through.
Yeah.
You play that same shot with a 54, where it's going to come out a little bit hotter, give you a little bit more yardage.
I definitely got back there.
Yeah. You can see there how, you know, if you do have kind of like a 15 to 20 yard shot, you can start to utilize that 54 degree. Would you feel confident enough to start to use that out of a bunker as well? Yeah, you know, even green side as well, right? So if I said to you, you know, almost try and throw one
back there
out to kind of that back left side of the green a little bit, yeah? So again, you know, even further past that, you know, right out towards that back of the green, trying to play it kind of 20, 25 yards. Good. Really nice. Now with a 58, you're going to struggle to get that much out of it, because the 58 is going to be very kind of high in that flight. Lovely shot. But really nice in terms of that loft and height.
Yeah.
That's a club that will, as to replace your 52 there, the 54 will just make such a difference in terms of where you can actually start to utilize it from 30 yards, actually in a greenside bunker as well.
So we've finished. Can we run through what I've ended up with and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So first wedge that we're moving down from your sort of 46 degree pitching wedge at the moment, we're actually going to move into the 48. And obviously where you play the 46 at the moment, this is just not making sure that 46 that you've got is too close to your pitching wedge. Okay, so just bringing that yardage back to a more consistent distance there. And then very similar to the setup that you go in at the moment is having that 6 degree gap. So we move then into a 54. Now, in the testing that we've done with the 54, we started to play some shots where you may not have used that club or the 52 equivalent that you had in the past. And we've started to see you hit some really nice shots, especially those longer greenside bunker shots, those pitches into the green as well, where all of a sudden you're kind of adding another string to your bow because you've got something else that you can rely on as opposed to just having to use that more lofted wedge. Okay?
A little bit more variety in the back now.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting there is that, you know, that's got some bounce to it as well. And that's what we found when we moved into that higher bounce than what you were currently using in that 58 with very little bounce. So we started to see the club actually release, the wedge actually release, deliver more loft, improve that strike, you know, get it away from that leading edge that you tended to play with quite a lot, okay?
Yeah, so that's on there, that's got 11 bounce.
Yes, yeah, so we are in the 48, we're at 9 degrees of bounce. Again, that's just kind of more traditional with where you'd expect a pitching wedge or gap wedge bounce angle to be. And then as we move into the 60 degree wedge, this was quite interesting. Obviously we tried all of the different varieties and started to look at where were those improvements being made in terms of strike. And what we've settled for here is, as much as we found that high bounce was great in some areas, that in some it also wasn't, okay? Very much like low bounce didn't really perform anywhere apart from a shot where you actually had real confidence. Yeah. You know, which is great. But if you are struggling with a bit of confidence, you still want the wedge to be there to help you, right? So what we've settled for here is the standard bounce C grind. Now the reason why we've gone for the C grind as opposed to just the standard bounce normal grind there is that this gives you a little bit of versatility. So we've got a bit of that heel relief. The sole's actually a little bit wider as well, and that camber is a little bit stronger, which just gives you a little bit more versatility around the greens there. Out of the bunker there, some of those shots that you hit were really nice. We started to see a little bit more elevation in the bunker as well, as opposed to that club just getting stuck and you're not delivering enough loft.
So that's got 9 bounce, but you were basically saying because it's got more loft, it feels like more.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you do want to open that face up and play the shots with more open face, you're only just adding bounce then again. And for you, in terms of understanding how bounce works and playing different shots like that tight lie, where a lot of people would assume that maybe a lower bounce wedge would be better. If you're delivering more loft and more bounce, it's only going to help work the club underneath the golf ball a little bit better and help pop that golf ball up off those tight lies. All
So
right?
basically, we've broken loads of myths today.
Yes.
I thought I had to use low bounce to nip it, and actually I'm thinning it because I'm using low bounce. So get yourself down and have a wedge fit in, because these might not perform how you think they actually do.